Allow me to introduce myself. I am Kextil of the Zephyrian Diplomatic Corps, and I have the dubious honor of being the one who compiled this report. You know, the one that is now required reading in every single galactic academy from here to the Andromeda Spiral. Yes, that report, the one about the human female and the 3 Bruthan enforcers who learned quite painfully why you should listen when a Terran gives you a warning. I was not present for the actual incident, mind you. They arrived 3 days later to conduct what we diplomatically call a routine investigation, but what everyone else calls figuring out how one tiny human woman put 3 professional muscleheads in the medical bay simultaneously. The paperwork alone nearly killed me. Do you know how many forms you have to fill out when a single being hospitalizes 3 others in under 90 seconds? 17. 17 different forms, each one asking essentially the same question in slightly different ways. How did this happen? Well, buckle up because I am about to tell you exactly how it happened. Omega-7 mining station orbits a particularly unremarkable gas giant in what humans charmingly call the middle of nowhere. It is a standard operation, really. Boring work, decent pay, and the kind of place where beings of various species come to make an honest living, extracting rare minerals from asteroid fields. Nothing exciting ever happened there. Well, nothing until Maya Chen arrived. The station housed roughly 400 beings at any given time. Zephyrians like myself handled administration and logistics. The Corathans managed the technical systems with their 6 arms and obsessive attention to detail. Trinity worked the mines with their natural resistance to radiation. And the Brithans? Well, the Brithans did what Brithans do best. They provided security and enforcement. Translation: they were the muscle. Maya Chen stood exactly 5 feet and 2 inches tall in her work boots. Her personnel file listed her age as 34 Terran years, her previous employment as various, and her emergency contact as none available. She had arrived on the monthly transport with nothing but a single duffel bag and the kind of quiet confidence that most beings mistake for shyness. She was assigned to mineral processing, 3rd shift, quiet work, steady hours and minimal interaction with others. Perfect for someone who seemed to prefer keeping to herself. Maya would arrive precisely 15 minutes before her shift, work with methodical efficiency and leave exactly on time. She spoke when spoken to, nodded politely to her coworkers, and ate her meals alone while reading on a small electronic device. In other words, she was the perfect target for beings who enjoyed making others miserable. Grokamar, Fulden, and Vashaka had been working Omega-7 for nearly 3 years. They were what we in the Diplomatic Corps politely call problem employees. Their supervisors called them barely tolerable. Everyone else just called them bullies. At 8 feet tall and weighing roughly 400 pounds each, they had made intimidation their specialty. They particularly enjoyed targeting smaller, quieter beings who were unlikely to fight back or file complaints. Maya Chen, with her small stature and preference for solitude, must have looked like a gift from whatever deities the Bruthans prayed to. It started small, as these things always do. Rokamar would accidentally bump into Maya in the corridors. The Lauden would make crude comments about human females just loud enough for her to hear. Vesaka would find excuses to inspect her work area, always finding some imaginary violation that required her to redo hours of processing. Maya's response was educational. The first time Grokmar shoved her into a wall, Maya straightened her uniform, looked him directly in his beady black eyes, and said in the most conversational tone imaginable, "You should probably not do that again. Not please, don't do that. Not I am going to report you." Just a simple observation delivered with the same tone one might use to comment on the weather. Grokmar laughed. His companions laughed. Half the corridor laughed. Maya did not laugh. She just walked away. When Thulden started making increasingly graphic comments about what he would like to do to a human female, Maya paused in her work, turned to face him and said, "If you continue talking like that, I am going to have to hurt you. Just so you know." Again, no anger, no raised voice. Just a calm statement of fact, delivered with the same inflection someone might use to mention that their shift was ending soon. Veladun found this hilarious. He shared Maya's threat with half the station. It became a running joke. Maya continued working, quietly, efficiently, and with what I now recognize was the patience of someone who had given fair warning. By the 3rd week, the harassment had escalated. Tools would go missing from Maya's workstation. Her meal crets were mysteriously deactivated twice. Someone had even put some sort of adhesive compound in her locker, ruining her spare uniform. Each incident prompted the same response from Maya. A calm, measured warning delivered with unsettling specificity. Grokmar, if you continue sabotaging my equipment, I am going to break your dominant arm in 3 places. Paulden, when you mess with my meal credits again, I am going to use that shock prod you carry to introduce you to some new and exciting sensations. Baska, the next time you put something disgusting in my locker, I am going to shove it down your throat. All of it. At once. The 3 brothers thought this was the funniest thing they had ever heard. A tiny human female threatening 3 professional enforcers. It was comedy gold. They started taking bets on what creative threat she would come up with next. What they failed to notice was that Maya's warnings were becoming increasingly detailed and increasingly specific, and that she had started studying their routines with the kind of attention most beings reserved for complex technical manuals. But I am getting ahead of myself. That comes in the next part of this sorry tale. Now, you might be wondering at this point why nobody thought to actually look into Maya Chen's background. After all, humans were still relatively new to the galactic community, and their personnel records were often incomplete. Well, it turns out someone did eventually check. Unfortunately for our 3 Bruthen friends, that someone was me, and I checked after the incident, not before. Maya Chen's full military record makes for fascinating reading if you enjoy stories about humans doing impossible things in impossible situations. 12 years of active service in something called the Terra Defense Corps Special Operations Division, 3 tours in what humans euphemistically call contested zones, decorated 7 times for exceptional valor under fire, qualified expert in 43 different weapon systems, and something called environmental combat adaptation. That last bit is important. Environmental combat adaptation, for those of you taking notes, is the human military's way of saying using whatever happens to be lying around as a weapon. Tools, furniture, kitchen utensils, decorative plants, other people. If it exists, humans have apparently figured out how to hurt someone with it. Maya's discharge papers list her reason for leaving as seeking civilian employment opportunities. Her commanding officer's personal recommendation, which I found buried in the classified section, was significantly more colorful. I quote, "Chen is the most naturally gifted combatant I have encountered in 28 years of service. She could kill a Regillian battle rhino with a soup spoon and make it look like an accident. Any organization lucky enough to employ her should pray she never gets angry." Prophetic words, as it turned out. But back to our story. The harassment campaign against Maya continued with the kind of creativity that comes from beings who have far too much time and far too little intelligence. Rukwar started timing his breaks to coincide with Maya's, cornering her in supply closets and storage areas where there were no witnesses. He would loom over her using his considerable size advantage to make her feel trapped and helpless. Maya's response to being cornered was to calmly explain exactly which of his bones she planned to break if he did not move. She would describe the fractures with medical precision, including estimated healing times and long-term mobility impacts. Krukmar found this hilarious. He started recording these conversations and sharing them with his friends. Tuldan escalated to physical harassment. Nothing that would show up on security cameras. Of course, a hand on the shoulder that lingered too long, standing just a bit too close during shift briefings. Accidental contact, that was anything but accidental. Each incident was followed by Maya's increasingly detailed explanations of what she would do to his reproductive organs if he touched her again. The other species on the station began to take notice, not because they were concerned about Maya, mind you, but because the whole situation had become entertainment. The Korathans started a betting pool on how long Maya would last before she either quit or had a breakdown. The Thrinidai were taking odds on which of the 3 Brithans would make her cry first. Even some of my fellow Zephyrians got involved, wagering on whether Maya would file a formal complaint or simply request a transfer. Nobody, and I mean nobody, bet on Maya actually fighting back. Humans were new, and their reputation at that point was mostly based on their diplomatic representatives. Polite, reasonable beings who solved problems through negotiation and compromise. The idea that this quiet little female could pose any threat to 3 professional enforcers was so absurd that it never occurred to anyone. Well, almost anyone. Station Commander Ulthesis was a Korathan administrator who had run Omega-7 for 8 years without a single major incident. His management philosophy was simple. If productivity remained high and nobody died, he did not want to hear about it. When Maya finally did file a complaint, Commander Ulysses reviewed it with the kind of enthusiasm most beings reserve for tax audits. Maya had documented everything: dates, times, witnesses, security camera footage references. She had even included audio recordings of the threats she had made in response to each incident. Commander Ulysses read through the entire file, noted that Maya's productivity had not declined despite the harassment, and marked the complaint as resolved through interdepartmental communication. Translation: he did absolutely nothing. Maya's response to this administrative brush-off was to request a meeting with Commander Ulysses. She sat across from his desk, her hands folded in her lap, and spoke in that same conversational tone that should have terrified anyone with half a brain. "Commander, I have given those 3 individuals multiple warnings about their behavior. I have documented each incident according to station protocols. I have filed the appropriate complaints through proper channels. You have chosen to ignore all of this, so now I am giving you the same courtesy I gave them. This is your warning. If they touch me again, I am going to hurt them. Badly. And when station security asks me why I did it, I am going to refer them to this conversation and to my previously filed complaints. Are we clear?" Commander Ulysses, who had dealt with thousands of workplace disputes over the years, interpreted this as an empty threat from a frustrated employee. He made some vague promises about looking into the matter, suggested that Maya might consider requesting a shift change to avoid future conflicts, and basically told her to stop wasting his time with trivial personnel issues. Maya thanked him politely for his time and left his office. She returned to her duties and said nothing more about the situation. To outside observers, it appeared that she had finally given up and accepted her circumstances. The betting pools adjusted their odds accordingly. Maya's silence was interpreted as defeat. The Bruthans, emboldened by the commander's inaction, began planning something they called their final lesson for the uppity human female. The end came on a routine Thursday during shift change. Maya was walking from the processing center to the transport hub when Grokmar stepped out of a maintenance corridor and blocked her path. Oldan and Vashka merged from behind her, cutting off any retreat. They had her trapped in a section of corridor with no security cameras and no witnesses. Grokmar started with his usual intimidation routine: looming, posturing, making crude comments about what they were going to do to teach her some respect. Maya listened with her typical calm expression, occasionally nodding as if she were receiving weather updates. When Grokmar finished his speech, Maya spoke in that same conversational tone she had used for all her previous warnings. "Grokmar, I have explained this to you 17 times now. I have filed formal complaints. I have spoken with your supervisor. I have exhausted all reasonable options for resolving this situation peacefully. So now I am going to ask you one last time, and I want you to think very carefully before you answer. Are you going to move out of my way, or am I going to have to move you?" Grokmar's response was to backhand Maya across the face with enough force to send her stumbling into the corridor wall, which was, as it turned out, exactly the wrong thing to do. What happened next, according to the 17 different witness statements I collected, the security footage from 3 different angles, and the medical reports that followed, was what humans apparently call a masterclass in applied violence. I prefer to think of it as the moment 3 bullies learned why you should always listen when someone gives you a warning. Maya's response to being struck was immediate, precise, and absolutely terrifying in its efficiency. She did not cry. She did not scream. She did not even look particularly angry. Instead, she straightened up from where Grokmar's blow had sent her, wiped a small trickle of blood from her lip, and said in that same conversational tone, "Well, I did warn you." Then she moved. I have reviewed the security footage approximately 37 times, and I still have trouble following exactly what happened. Human combat techniques, it turns out, are based on principles that most civilized species find deeply disturbing. While the rest of us evolved sophisticated methods for avoiding violence, humans apparently spent their evolutionary history perfecting it. Maya's first target was Grokmar, the one who had struck her. She stepped forward instead of away, closing the distance between them before he could react. Her right hand came up in what looked like a simple palm strike to his solar plexus. The impact folded Grokmar in half, like a cheap lawn chair. As he doubled over, gasping for air, Maya's knee came up to meet his descending face with a sound that I am told was audible 3 corridors away. Grokmar, all 400 pounds of him, went down like a demolished building. Blood from his shattered nose painted the corridor wall in an abstract pattern that would have been artistic if it were not so disturbing. Thulden, standing behind Maya, finally processed what was happening and lunged forward to grab her. This was, according to the human combat manual I later studied, what they call a tactical error. Maya dropped into a crouch, swept Thulden's legs with her left foot, and drove her elbow into his knee as he fell. The sound of Thulden's kneecap dislocating was, witnesses reported, remarkably similar to someone stepping on a large insect. As Thulden hit the floor, screaming and clutching his ruined leg, Maya was already turning toward Vashka. The third Brothan, finally understanding that he was not dealing with a helpless victim, reached for the shock prod on his belt. This is where things got really educational. Maya had apparently spent her time on the station studying not just her tormentor's routines, but also the layout and equipment of Omega-7. She knew exactly where she was, what resources were available, and how to use them. As Vashka fumbled with his weapon, Maya grabbed a fire suppression canister from the corridor wall, twisted the release valve, and sprayed a stream of high-pressure foam directly into his eyes. Blinded and choking, Vashka staggered backward, swinging his shock prod wildly. Maya stepped aside, grabbed the weapon as it passed by her, and introduced Vashka to the business end of his own equipment. The electrical discharge dropped him immediately, his entire body convulsing as muscles that were designed to intimidate others suddenly stopped following his commands. Total elapsed time from Grokmar's slap to Vashka hitting the floor, 87 seconds. The first witness to arrive on the scene was a Korathan maintenance worker named Zilkavar, who had been responding to reports of loud noises in Corridor 7 Gamma. What he found was 3 Bruthan enforcers in various states of injury and unconsciousness, and one small human female calmly straightening her uniform and checking her chronometer. Zilkavar's statement, which I quote verbatim, reads, "I observed the human female standing among 3 incapacitated Bruthans. She appeared completely uninjured and oddly serene. When I asked what had happened, she replied that there had been a workplace disagreement that was now resolved. She then asked if I could direct her to the nearest incident reporting station, as she needed to file some paperwork. Other witnesses began arriving within minutes. Word of the incident spread through the station with the kind of speed usually reserved for news about pay raises or surprise inspections. Beings who had been taking bets on Maya's inevitable breakdown suddenly found themselves staring at evidence that their understanding of human capabilities was severely flawed. Kathanor, a Threnovi shift supervisor, later reported, "I have seen combat. I served in the border conflicts with the hegemony. What that human female did was not fighting. Fighting implies that both sides have a chance of winning. This was more like watching a maintenance technician repair a broken piece of equipment. Methodical, efficient, and completely one-sided." Dr. Yashtel, the station's chief medical officer, had the pleasure of treating the 3 Bruthans. Her medical report makes for interesting reading. Rokumar suffered a shattered nose, severe concussion, and what the doctor diplomatically described as significant trauma to the facial region. Thulden required surgery to repair his dislocated kneecap and would be walking with a limp for the foreseeable future. Vashka had first-degree burns on his face and neck from the fire suppression foam, plus the after-effects of being shocked with his own weapon. Dr. Yashas's personal notes, which I obtained through what we diplomats call creative interpretation of information-sharing protocols, were significantly less diplomatic. "I have never seen injuries like these. Outside of industrial accidents or natural disasters, the precision required to inflict this level of damage without causing permanent disability suggests either incredible luck or terrifying skill. Given that all 3 injuries were perfectly targeted to incapacitate without killing, I am inclined toward the latter explanation." While the medical team worked to put the Bruthans back together, Maya was filing her incident report. She completed the standard forms with the same methodical attention to detail she brought to her regular duties. Under description of events, she wrote, 3 co-workers initiated unwanted physical contact despite multiple verbal warnings. I defended myself using reasonable force until the threat was neutralized. All previous complaints and warnings are documented in my personnel file. When station security arrived to investigate, they found Maya waiting patiently in the corridor, her hands folded in her lap, reading her electronic device as if nothing unusual had happened. Security Chief Mordak, a veteran Zephyrian with 20 years of law enforcement experience, later described the scene as surreal. The human was sitting there reading what appeared to be a technical manual on mineral processing efficiency, Mordak reported. When I asked her to explain what had happened, she provided a clear, detailed account of events with precise timestamps and accurate descriptions of each individual's actions. She showed no signs of emotional distress, physical exhaustion, or regret. When I asked if she required medical attention, she checked her reflection in her communicator screen and observed that she had a small cut on her lip that would heal naturally. The security investigation was remarkably straightforward. Maya had documented everything. Her previous complaints provided clear evidence of escalating harassment. The security footage showed the three Bruthans cornering her and Gropmar striking first. Her response, while devastatingly effective, was clearly defensive in nature. More importantly, Maya had followed proper protocols. She had filed complaints. She had sought administrative intervention. She had given multiple warnings. She had exhausted all peaceful options before resorting to violence. The fact that her version of resorting to violence involved hospitalizing three beings simultaneously was certainly noteworthy, but it was also completely legal under station regulations. Commander Ultisis, faced with irrefutable evidence that he had ignored legitimate complaints that directly led to this incident, suddenly became very interested in reviewing station policies regarding workplace harassment. His revised incident report classified the event as justified self-defense following administrative failure to address documented safety concerns. Translation: he threw the three Bruthans under the transport shuttle and prayed that Maya would not file a lawsuit against the station. Maya, for her part, returned to her regular duties the next day as if nothing had happened. She arrived 15 minutes early, worked with her usual efficiency, and left exactly on time. The only difference was that the corridors seemed to clear whenever she walked through them, and her meal credits were never mysteriously deactivated again. The investigation into Maya's background, which should have been conducted before hiring her, became a priority after the incident. What we found was both enlightening and terrifying. The woman who had been quietly processing minerals for 3 months was in fact one of Earth's most decorated veterans. Maya Chen had served in conflicts that most galactic citizens had never heard of. The Proxima Uprising, where human colonists held off a hegemony invasion force for 6 months using nothing but mining equipment and sheer stubbornness. The Titan Station Siege, where she personally eliminated an entire enemy infiltration team using improvised explosives made from cleaning supplies. The Battle of Europa 7, where her unit successfully defended a research facility against overwhelming odds for 43 days. Her commendations included the Terra Defense Cross for extraordinary heroism under impossible circumstances, the Stellar Campaign Medal with 7 battle clusters, and something called the Improvised Combat Excellence Citation, which apparently was created specifically to recognize her unique talent for turning household objects into weapons of mass destruction. The most telling entry in her record was a psychological evaluation conducted after her final mission. The evaluating psychiatrist had written, "Lieutenant Chen displays remarkable emotional stability and tactical adaptability. She possesses an almost supernatural ability to remain calm under extreme stress and to identify optimal solutions using available resources. Recommend immediate promotion and assignment to Training Division. Notes: strongly advise against placing Lieutenant Chen in situations where she feels cornered or threatened, as her response protocols default to maximum efficiency rather than minimum force." Reading this after the incident was like finding a warning label after someone had already ignored it and suffered the consequences. The revelation of Maya's true background prompted immediate changes to station policies. Commander Ultisis, suddenly aware that he had nearly caused an interspecies incident by ignoring the complaints of a decorated human warrior, implemented protocols with impressive speed. All harassment complaints would now be investigated within 24 hours. Mandatory sensitivity training was instituted for all security personnel. Background checks for human employees would include military service verification. Most importantly, a new classification was added to personnel files. Deceptively dangerous, handle with extreme caution. Maya became the first being ever assigned this classification. She would not be the last. The 3 Bruthan enforcers, once they recovered sufficiently to speak coherently, found themselves in an unusual position. Word of their encounter with Maya had spread throughout the galactic community with the kind of speed that bad news typically achieves. They had become inadvertent ambassadors for human capabilities, living examples of what happened when you underestimated a member of the species. Grokmar, speaking through a reconstructed nose and several missing teeth, began telling anyone who would listen, "Do not mess with the humans. I know they look small and soft, but they are not. They are definitely not. I hit one once. I do not recommend this experience." Thulden, now walking with a permanent limp, and a titanium knee replacement, became something of a traveling speaker on the subject of human capabilities. His most popular presentation, "Why That Quiet Human in the Corner Is Probably Planning 17 Different Ways to Kill You," was requested at security conferences throughout the sector. Vesca took a different approach. He requested a transfer to the farthest possible posting from any human-occupied station, and spent his remaining career ensuring that his new co-workers understood that humans were to be treated with the same respect one might show to unexploded ordnance. Maya, meanwhile, found her work situation significantly improved. Her productivity evaluations, already impressive, began including notes like exceptional problem-solving abilities, and demonstrates leadership potential. Her shift supervisor recommended her for advanced training. Her department head suggested she might be interested in a supervisory position. Within 6 months, Maya had been promoted to assistant processing manager with a salary increase and her own office. Her new responsibilities included training new employees, developing safety protocols, and serving as liaison between human workers and station administration. She approached these duties with the same methodical competence she had shown in everything else. The truly remarkable change, however, was in how other species interacted with Maya. The betting pools about her breaking down were replaced by requests for advice. Cow workers who had previously ignored her began seeking her input on technical problems. Even the Corathans, normally dismissive of non-technical personnel, started consulting her on efficiency improvements. Maya's response to this newfound respect was typical of her character. She was polite, helpful, and professional with everyone who approached her respectfully. She shared her knowledge freely, mentored new employees effectively, and continued to eat her meals alone while reading technical manuals. The incident became a case study in human psychology, military effectiveness, and workplace management. Every galactic academy now includes the Omega-7 incident in their required coursework on interspecies relations. Students learn about the importance of proper background checks, the dangers of ignoring harassment complaints, and the concept of humans as a deceptively dangerous species. The official classification of humans as deceptively dangerous was not intended as an insult. Rather, it serves as a warning to other species that human capabilities are often hidden beneath an unassuming exterior. A human who appears weak may be incredibly strong. A human who seems peaceful may be a trained warrior. A human who looks helpless may be the most dangerous being in the room. The classification includes specific guidelines for interaction. Treat all humans with respect regardless of apparent physical limitations. Take human warnings seriously regardless of how politely they are delivered, and never assume that a human's reluctance to fight indicates an inability to do so effectively. Maya herself seemed amused by her new classification. When asked about it during a routine personnel review, she observed that humans had been trying to explain this concept to other species for years, but apparently some lessons could only be learned through direct experience. The final twist in Maya's story came 2 years after the incident. Station administration approached her with a proposal. Would she be interested in developing a self-defense training program for non-combat personnel? The program would teach basic defensive techniques to beings who worked in isolated or potentially dangerous situations. Maya accepted the position with enthusiasm. Her first class included 3 Zephyrian administrators, 5 Corathan technicians, 2 Threnody miners, and 1 very nervous Bruthan security guard, who had specifically requested assignment to Maya's station because he wanted to learn from the human who taught Grokmar about consequences. The program became so popular that requests came in from stations throughout the sector. Maya began traveling as a consultant, teaching other species how to defend themselves using improvised weapons and environmental advantages. Her signature course, Turning Your Workplace into a Fortress, Advanced Self-Defense Using Office Supplies, was booked solid for the next 18 months. And thus, Maya Chen went from being a quiet mineral processor to one of the most sought-after self-defense instructors in the galaxy. All because 3 bullies decided to ignore her warnings and learned, rather painfully, that humans mean exactly what they say. 5 years later, the impact of the Omega-7 incident continues to ripple through galactic society. Maya Chen now runs her own consulting firm, Practical Defense Solutions, and has trained over 10,000 beings in what she calls creative problem-solving under pressure. Her waiting list extends for 2 years, and her fees could fund a small space station. Grokmar works as a motivational speaker, sharing his experiences with workplace bullying and its consequences. His autobiography, How I Learned to Stop Underestimating Humans and Love My Reconstructed Face, is required reading at 3 major universities. Fulton opened a rehabilitation center for beings recovering from human-related injuries, a surprisingly common condition since the incident became widely known. Veshka retired early and spends his time gardening on a peaceful agricultural world, where the most dangerous thing he encounters is an occasionally aggressive fruit tree. Commander Eultethesis received a commendation for implementing the most effective harassment prevention program in station history. He now teaches administrative management at the Galactic Leadership Institute, where his most popular lecture is titled, "Why You Should Always Read the Personnel Files." The story has fundamentally changed how the galactic community views humans. What was once seen as a species of harmless diplomats and engineers is now understood to be a civilization of beings who prefer peace but are exceptionally well prepared for war. As for me, Kekstral the diplomat, I have learned never to trust appearances when dealing with humans. That sweet elderly grandmother selling baked goods at the spaceport, probably a retired commando. The cheerful maintenance worker fixing your air recycling system likely knows 47 ways to kill you with a wrench. The humans, you see, were not trying to deceive us about their nature. They were simply being polite, and politeness, as 3 former bullies can attest, should never be mistaken for weakness.